And good morning, this is Gene, KB9001, MWDX, SWL, SSB, and of course my ham radio call sign, Whiskey November Niner, Zulu Whiskey Charlie, and this is Listening in Radio. Thanks for coming back and listening. This is podcast number 3 of Listening in Radio. It's Veterans Day here in the United States, the 11th of November, approximately 1650 UTC. I like to honor all the veterans out there in the country right now and around the world. Thank you for your service. A hand salute on this end. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I did it myself for many, many years, almost 18 years, both in the Navy and the Army National Guard. I appreciate your service, and I always tell people when they come up to me and thank me for my service, I always say, you know what, I probably wouldn't have done it if you hadn't paid me, because it was a tough proposition. And this show today, but thank you, this show today is dedicated to travelers. And when I say travelers, I mean truckers, RVers, backpackers, bikers, business travelers, all the above, all the people who travel for their jobs, because radio is a good thing to take along when you're traveling. I myself own a 22-foot Wildwood travel trailer, which I plan to spend a lot more time in as time passes here and I get a little bit older. So I always take along different types of radios when I RV, and of course if I'm driving my truck around anyhow, I have a VHF radio in there and a CB radio as well. So I always carry ham radio, and I usually carry my dual band transceiver with me, my dual band HT. I have a Yaesu radio, and I keep that around with me too, and I'll get on the air and go around and get on repeaters as I'm traveling and other things, and talk to people on the CB as well. I'm not partial to any particular radio. Radio is radio. It just depends on what's going on. So let's move on here. What's going on in the news today? Well, in the news, lots of doom and gloom, a lot of political strife going on, and the political atmosphere in this country right now kind of basically sucks. A lot of stuff flying around, and not to mention that, you know, winter is on its way, and nobody likes that. And I'm in the upper Midwest, so it's kind of tough to deal with some of the winters around here. We'll see how the snow situation plays out, but it is what it is. And you know, though we've seen all this before, we've seen bad winters, and we've seen bad politics and bad situations in the country, and a lot of wars going back. My experience with our country being at war goes back to the Vietnam period, so a lot to think about there. But during times like these, when things are not going well economically for people, and people are not easy in their communities because of things that are going on, it makes people like really mobile. And I'm seeing more people considering RVs and tiny homes and moving to different states, and trying to find employment elsewhere because they cannot find employment in their community. If there's strife going on, if there's, you know, a lot of business closures are going on in the major cities because of the things that are happening out there. So people become very mobile during this time. But the upside of a down economy and a down political situation is an opportunity for growth. You know, it's a good time to assess ourselves, and find out, you know, what we're made of, and to test our faith and our personal resilience. I do a lot of that, you know, and I do have, you know, faith in God, and I carry that along with me. But I also grow through my hobbies, and I've grown through the radio hobby for many, many years, because the radio hobby goes back to me being a teenager, so it's been around for me for a long time. So I grow through my hobbies, and radio is more than a hobby for me personally. It's a way of life, and it's been an element of my personal survival. You know, I was a police officer, and I worked the streets for many years. That radio and the MDT and the police vehicle later on, the MDTs came later on with communicating through computers. You know, they saved my life a couple times, for sure. And so radios are an inherent part of what kept me safe, and I think radios and communications is an inherent part of what keeps everybody safe. And now everybody has a communication device in their hand. You have instant access to emergency services through your telephone. So that's like really important, and it's always in your pocket. That's an important communication device. But I do advocate for traditional radio, meaning shortwave and AM and other modes of comms, and So listening in radio, this part of my hobby that I created here, we advocate for shortwave radio. And why? And AM radio, of course. Why? Because phones sometimes do not work in rural areas. I'm in the middle of Iowa. When I leave the urban areas and go to rural areas to do my job, because my job takes me to many different places throughout Iowa, those rural areas still are running on 4G, or you drop signal out there. It's very slow. So for my job, it's like kind of important maybe to have a backup radio in a real emergency if something comes up, so I can reach out to somebody. So that's a consideration. If you are a prepper, if you're worried about disasters, and preppers, I think preppers get a bad name. I think we should all be preppers in one way or the other, whether we learn to grow our own food, whether we stock extra food for and money, stock extra food and money for a rainy day. We should probably be doing that. Backpackers, of course. I had an experience up in Estes Park, Colorado, one time where I was camping up there, and I had my 2-meter radio, and I programmed it to get into the local repeater in Estes Park. And I'm sitting there listening to the radio. Next thing I know, I hear a guy who was climbing up on one of the mountains, and he had made the summit, and he got to the top, and he was calling people from the summit. Well, what an opportunity that was for me to reach out to this guy and talk to him. And I could see the mountain from where I was sitting at my campground. I could actually see where he was at. And I was looking up there, and he says, "Hey, this is where I'm at. I just made summit, and I'm going to cross this grassy area up here on the mountain." And you could see it because the top of the mountain looked a little bit like a volcano vent, which is probably what it was at one time. And he was going to cross that, and he was going to come down the other side of that, which is really awesome. But he talked to me, and he says, "Hey, when I'm going to come back down, I'm going to call you again." And he did. He called me again when he came back down to let me know that he was coming down. He was going to make his descent and come back down to the base. So he let me know. So that was really a cool experience. And that was good for him, because what if he couldn't get cell phone service up there, right? He had that radio. So it was very important for him to have that. Being an RV traveler, I'm an RV traveler, okay? And I did drive a truck for a little while too. The CB radio is still very viable, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. So that's my advocacy and my statement on what I feel about radio and how important radio still is and how it is still viable in our society and how it's useful. So what's going on with propagation? Propagation has been looking better. And for those of you who don't understand propagation, and I'm going to share this particular podcast on an RV site, so I want to explain what propagation is so people understand that. Propagation is simply how a radio wave propagates or spreads, or how far it can reach under certain conditions. And conditions vary. Conditions vary during different seasons. Conditions vary during sun cycles. They vary during weather conditions. So there's a lot that plays into that. And if you could look that word up yourself, or look up radio propagation online on Google and take a look at what that means. And some radios, it might seem like, hey, that radio's not working for some reason. I bought this radio, it doesn't work. And you know what? It may not be the radio. It may be propagation for that time, or what's going on that particular day, season, or sun cycle. Because after the sun cycle changed here, CB picked up all over them, as I found out, because I kind of returned to the CB part of radio over the last year or so, and I found out that, man, there's many people on a CB on all channels, on single sideband. They're just like all over the place. So it's really something to think about where CB is concerned and how far that reaches when propagation conditions are good. So again, it's looking better. I'm currently participating in the International Shortwave Contest. It's actually shortwave and medium wave, or AM radio contest. And it's over the last 24 hours, the conditions were pretty good. They're not so good this morning, I checked, but they did really open up for a while there, and I was hearing broadcasts from all over the world. So that shortwave contest is well underway. I've logged about 200 transmissions from broadcasters from about 40 different shortwave stations on multiple frequencies, because I'm logging every contact I receive on different frequencies for the contest, so I can send them good logs, because you can actually get points for logging the same station on a different frequency. So it's going very well. I'm hearing many AM radio stations at nighttime, and again, for people who are RVers, this is good to know. Your AM radio in your vehicle that you either haul or inside, if you're in a motorhome, your AM radio is a very viable way to get emergency communications into your vehicle or into your situation, so you can understand what's going on. And one big thing about AM radio, they're very weather related, and weather in certain times of the year can always be a threat, especially to an RVer who's in a motorhome or a travel trailer. So it's something to think about. And so I picked up this news this morning, and this is from www.adn.com, which is Anchorage Daily News. And I don't know if anybody out here has ever heard of HAARP. I wanted to mention it in this one because HAARP might determine some conditions for how we operate radio. Many years ago, the HAARP project, which is called it's called the High Altitude Resonance Project, and basically what they do is they reflect radio waves off the ionosphere and do experiments, and I think they're trying to control the ionosphere, but it was actually considered a conspiracy theory at one time, and it turns out it's not a conspiracy theory. Of course, the people who were in radio, we all knew it wasn't a conspiracy theory because we actually heard it. We've been monitoring it for a lot of years, and I had to laugh when somebody said, like, well, HAARP is a conspiracy theory. Well, no, actually, it's not a conspiracy theory. I've heard it myself on the radio, and I've heard them putting out radio signals. And HAARP isn't the only one that uses radio waves bounced off the atmosphere. So does WWV. And WWV is again, for the people who aren't aware of it, they're the 24-hour day, 7-day week, 365-day year atomic clock that you can listen to on various frequencies on shortwave to set your clocks by. So, and they also do experiments, but they'll say, right on their broadcast, as they're doing their tones, they'll come right on the broadcast. They'll say, on this day at such and such time, we will be doing an experiment by bouncing radio signals off the ionosphere. So they're telling you that they're doing it. So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's actually real. But I just want to read this story to you. And it appeared in this Alaska news source. And it's dated just this week. It's November 4th, 2023. And it says, HAARP experiments could cause artificial aurora over Alaska this weekend. And it's by Zachary Hughes. And it just so happens that the news stories here are saying that we will be seeing the aurora borealis over the next couple days. And it can be seen as far south as where I'm at. And that's kind of unusual. That's not an everyday thing. And the article says the Ionospheric Research Instrument, IRI, at the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, facility in Gakona on August 25th, 2018, Lauren Holmes, ADN watchers of the night sky along with Alaska's road system may catch a colorful splotch of light up high in the air over the weekend. Though it might look like the aurora, the red or greenish air glow is the ionosphere is a byproduct of a rare 4-day-long set of experiments at the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, in Gakona. Each day, the air glow could be visible up to 300 miles from the HAARP facility, according to a statement from the Geophysical Institute University at Alaska Fairbanks, by creating an artificial aurora with equipment on the ground. Researchers hope to learn more about the natural aurora. So maybe that's something for a listening opportunity that you might hear on the radio, on shortwave or whatever. You might want to research that and see what you can find out. I'm going to do it myself. And that segues into listening opportunities. So what's new in listening opportunities? Well, right now is a great time to get a shortwave radio. And I'm saying that because you need to take into consideration really a lot of things that are going on in the world right now. And I think it's worth putting your ear on different perspectives of what's happening in the world. And I think that there may be some worthwhile information out there as time goes on. I think that shortwave radio is actually going to show some improvement in usefulness over the next couple of years. I think it's a good time to do that. So opportunities for travelers, if you get a shortwave radio, a couple stations to listen to are WWCR, WRMI, and also once you get involved in it and you take a look at some other schedules, there's more stuff, but there's a program that's particularly interested in the morning. It's on WWCR at 160 megahertz during the morning and daytime hours, and you can hear them pretty clearly. WRMI is also placed, but WRMI is a little spotty with how they deliver news and how things are expressed there, but it's a place to go to start. But I recommend WWCR a little bit more because they are doing some interesting and worthwhile analysis to listen to about the world situation. Okay, AM radio. You know, travelers, AM radio is a listening opportunity, is your greatest friend on the road, in the woods. Many AM radios are coming with all AM radio and NOAA weather, right? So it's good to own one of these radios, especially if it has automatic NOAA weather or NOAA alert. It's a good thing. And then, you know, AM radio kind of gives you some insight into like your local communities. So if you're maybe camping up in the mountains, or you're in an area you've never been before, you know, tuning in at AM radio gives you like a pulse of what's happening in that immediate area. It gives you some idea about the culture. I used to own some property way up north on Lake Superior, and I was actually between two Native American Indian reservations. One was Red Rock, and then the other one was Bad River, and the other one was, I think, Red Rock, which was north of us. But I used to listen to they had community radio stations there, and I listened to them all the time. They were actually both FM radio stations. But I would listen to them, and I would hear Native American culture, because there was a lot of Native Americans up there. And so it was interesting to me to pay attention to them and learn their culture and understand what was going on in that area, because they talked a lot about the history and how things, how they interfaced with the community and what the communities were like. And of course, I caught regular radio there, and you got a feeling for what was going on. And there was public service announcements and telling you about events. So local radio is very important. AM, FM is very important. AM radio is very good in an emergency situation. You know, and I think that AM radio, or when you listen to any radio, especially if it's localized and you get a warm, fuzzy feeling from it, it helps with, you know, giving you some personal security. It might be something to listen to. You know, what if you were lost in the woods? What if something happened? This would be a way for you to, you know, keep yourself calm and, you know, focus on other things. You know, I think it just takes the stress away. I really do. And, you know, AM radio, and I advocate AM radio because AM radio, you can hear radio stations from many, many miles away. So even if you were in a really remote region, if you have an AM radio, you're going to hear something. You're going to find something, especially during the nighttime. You're going to hear things from all over. I grew up very far from where I live now, and I lived there for almost 50 years in Illinois, and then I moved to where I'm at now, and I became pretty lost for a while here. And I'm still kind of making the adjustment, but you know what? I can pick up my AM radio, and I can still hear AM radio stations from the Chicago area where I grew up in my early days, and it gives me a little bit of comfort when I listen to that, because I can hear some news from home, or what I consider home, and hear them. And it kind of calms me down a little bit. It gives me some perspective. So, you know, just some food for thought. Citizens Band Radio. Citizens Band Radio is still very, very, very viable in an emergency situation. And a lot of people will say, no, ham radio, get a ham radio license. And I have a ham radio license. In ham radio, the localized communications was on 2 meters, which was in 70 centimeters, which was VHF and UHF, and they were very packed. The repeaters, when I first came on, they were very, very packed with people because they were using it for family communications. Well, cell phones came along, and that all came to an end. They're trying to find some type of viability for VHF and UHF in the ham radio world, and they do it through having nets every once in a while. But I'll tell you, if you listen to the entire spectrum that we have on VHF and UHF, really not hearing a lot. And I just have to be honest about that. And I'm not saying it's not viable. You know, there are linked repeater systems out west to us where you could get on conceivably and put an emergency call through those linked repeater systems, and you can be heard for thousands of square miles. It was the same up north on Lake Superior area. We had a linked repeater system up there, and when you came up and talked, people, you could be in the middle of Wisconsin, and I was talking to somebody all the way on the other side of Lake Michigan in northern Michigan on the same repeater system. So that's quite a viable means of emergency communication, but not very viable in other areas. You know, it just depends on really where you're at and what you can get into with the repeater. Now CB, Citizens Band Radio, or the 27 megahertz band, what's going on there is there's been a big resurgence of Citizens Band. Truckers still very much have CBs in their radio. And you don't realize this, and I had a CB in my truck for a long time, and I didn't realize it one day till I was out on Route 30 here, and there was a big accident on the road, and I suddenly, I never really hear many truckers, but when all the traffic started to jam up because of this accident, the truckers all popped on the CB, and there were many on there, and I hear them here. But overall, all of the CB channels right now, the frequencies are kind of packed because there's new manufacturers coming online like Anytone, and they're producing radios that have a lot of bells and whistles and things that people like about these radios. So they're getting more buyers, and they're getting more people on frequency transmitting and receiving, because they're building radios that are very, very unique, and they do unique things. They introduced FM in the CB, so you could buy a CB that has an FM mode. And you can have a CB that has an FM mode and single sideband, so you can get on single sideband and talk to the whole country on it. So that's kind of what's going on. So CB in an emergency situation, if I had my choice, if somebody said, for an emergency, what do you want? Do you want a citizens band radio, or do you want a VHF 2-meter radio? I would have to say a citizens band radio, because the chances of me getting close to a highway and calling an SOS over the citizens band on channel 19, and I would recommend channel 19 over channel 9. I don't believe channel 9 used to be the emergency frequency, but I don't think that's monitored much anymore. The closest, or the most populated channel on citizens band is still channel 19. So if you get on channel 19, you're going to get somebody if you call out an emergency. It's just a foregone conclusion. Okay, so have to be honest. There's also other services that are out there. There's GMRS, but there's not a lot of GMRS repeaters. There's family radios, and apparently some people are trying to do something with those, but I don't think those are viable yet. There's not many GMRS repeaters, which is GMRS is general radio service, or general mobile radio service, and I don't think there's a lot of repeaters. I still think if you're a traveler, and like I said, this show is dedicated to you travelers, I think a citizens band radio should be part of your repertoire in your vehicles. That's my recommendation. And of course, you have your cell phone, which your cell phone, in most cases, is still a really great, viable means of communication. But if it's not where you're at, you have to have a secondary to go to. So that's that. Okay, shout out to all mobile travelers and backpackers and homesteaders, and I really appreciate. I'm getting a little bit long-winded here. I usually don't do my podcast this long, so I'm going to kind of get to it because everybody's got a busy life. So again, I really appreciate everybody out there. And today is Veterans Day. Again, big salute to the veterans of this country. I'm doing a lot of logging right now for the shortwave contest, and I'll do a separate podcast on logging because that probably wouldn't apply in this particular podcast anyway. Again, this is Gene, KB9001, MWDX, SWL, SSB, and of course my ham radio call sign WN9CWC. Thanks for spending the last 23 minutes and 5 seconds with me. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.